Hello, everybody. This is Catholic Dad, episode number 253. This is the French Revolution versus the American Revolution. You know, when I grew up in civil courses within public high school and public school, they always talked about how the American Revolution inspired the French Revolution on another continent. It was very similar and had a lot in common with it. Well, years of praying and years of studying and years of figuring out history, I figured out, the French Revolution had nothing to do with the American Revolution. And the American Revolution was, I guess, more pure, more pristine than the French Revolution. So what happened in the American Revolution? American Revolution was essentially this: a whole bunch of people on another continent, which were ruled by a foreign king very, very far away, that felt like they had tyranny within their own country, that they were taking away the labors of the average citizen to provide for their families. They were taking away their homes because they were housing troops within their own quarters without asking permission of the landowners. Essentially they were overtaxing them, overregulating them, and asking too much of them. And so the people stood up, and it was essentially an average worker revolution that stood up and said no to the elite, no to the bourgeois, I guess. The average farmer guy, the average business guy, the average lawyer, the average, you name it, essentially said, no, we're taking our country back so it would serve the better needs of ourselves, the people of the United States of America. They didn't say the United States of America, of these colonies is what they said. Now the French Revolution, so the American Revolution was 1776, and the French Revolution was 1789, the storming of the Bastille. What they said was this, that and the average, not the average, the angry or annoyed Frenchmen stormed the Bastille on the Bastille Day. But it was not a revolution of them versus the elite, not them versus the crown, not them versus the government. The French Revolution was a revolution of the elite versus the elite. And they used the average Joe Schmo, which felt disparaged in society, to rise up against the crown, against the church, against civilization, against anything that was normal within French society. And there are several proofs of this, by the way. Does anybody know what the first two laws that were instituted after the French Revolution and the storming of the Bastille? Number one, it was no-fault divorce, essentially, that you didn't have to stay married anymore, and you can get out of any marriage that you wanted to get out of, number one. Number two is they abolished all holy orders. Essentially, you couldn't become priests anymore, and you couldn't live a religious life as a nun. So those were the first two laws instituted in the French Revolution. Now, that means that the French Revolution was a revolution against the church and the family. That's what the French Revolution was. And further proof of this, by the way, the third law that was instituted was that all clergy and the church had to be subservient to secular law. This is the idea of separation of church and state, and this is what's going on in China right now, by the way, that the average religious had to bow to secular law. And that's not a separation of church and state. That's the state dominating the church, and that's what was happening in France. Well, there were a whole bunch of clergy and religious nuns, religious sisters, that essentially said, no, we will not give up our religious freedom to the secular government, which is very much anti-religious, and we're not going to do that. So what happened? Well, they essentially instituted secular martyrdom of the religious, and they executed literally thousands and thousands of nuns and priests, and the river Seine flowed red with the blood of the martyrs, the Christian martyrs in the French Revolution. Now, if you want to try to compare the two, under no circumstance did the American Revolution lead to an attack on the religious people of the United States of America, or the colonialists. Number one. Number two, they didn't make a no-fault divorce or attack the Christian unity of marriage. Number three, they didn't try to take over marriage at all, And number four, they didn't try to have the state take over the religious life of people, saying that they could no longer become priests and nuns. So the American Revolution really was, it was a unique inflection point in history that was truly one of liberty and freedom, that the people that were rising up against the crown in England, that they were rising up because they felt like they weren't represented, that they were trying to carry out their moral obligations to their fellow man, and they were being hindered in doing so, and therefore they rose up against King George III. The French Revolution, on the other hand, was essentially there was a crown. It was a religious crown. It was a Catholic. It was a Catholic crown in France, and a bunch of I would say probably mostly Protestant, Huguenot type people, Freemasons, you name it. What they did was they did a bunch of saber rattling of the people, saying they have all this money and you have none. They started class warfare and genderism and whatever else, all the stuff that they're trying today. And they got the people to do the bidding of the people that wanted to destroy the crown. And proof of that is that all the laws that were made shortly thereafter were made against family, were made against religious life. And if you didn't submit to the authority of the state as a religious, then you were soon martyred and killed. Now there's a room. I don't remember the cathedral that it's at. It's called the Room of the Swords, or the Room of the Points. I don't speak French anymore. I used to actually in high school, but where it's kind of been made into a shrine of the blood of the martyrs within France, and the soldiers of the secular government after the French Revolution were ordered to kill anybody that did not submit to the authority of the state, and so. These soldiers were killing people and just like continuously killing people, and they gave them this rest room where they would go because it's difficult to kill human beings. I don't know if you know that. Humans are hard and difficult and not easy to kill. I mean, if you ever went hunting and killed a deer, it's not easy to do, and then they gut out a deer, that's not easy. Well, they were killing humans, and they needed a place to rest, and so they would take the bayonets, they would take their rifles, because they were killing them with bayonet point and rifle shooting. They would lean them against the wall in this room, the Room of the Swords, the Room of the Points, and the blood would drip down the walls. And this is enshrined in France today, in Paris, that shows, that proves the revolution of the French was not the revolution of the Americans. The American Revolution was one of liberty and freedom. The one of the French Revolution was one of anti-Christianity, anti-family, and it was one of class warfarism. It was essentially the pre-communism, pre-Karl Marx, égalité, right, equality. Nowhere in the American Revolution did they whisper an iota of the word equality. They talked about liberty and freedom. They did not talk about like égalité or equality. In fact, if you look at the last 100 years in the world, a little bit over that, the pursuit of égalité or equality led to hundreds of millions of dead people at the hand of the state, much like it did in the French Revolution. So anyway, this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe, get the Mass, and pray the Daily Rosary. And oh, by the way, do some meditating upon this, because after the crown was thrown over in America, America prospered and it became like the beacon of the world where everybody wanted to go. After the crown was overthrown in France, there was a absolute Robespierre's reign of terror, and there were literally revolution after revolution after revolution, each one more bloody than the last. And so that should prove to you that the French Revolution was not similar. So anyway, take care and live a holy life, everybody, and get the Mass, pray the Daily Rosary, and do like or subscribe.